Hello and welcome to Noble Mind.
Noble Mind is a podcast exploring mindfulness, meditation, and psychology. Hello, listeners. This week, we speak to Victoria Brattini about self-compassion, working with worry, and practical tools to enhance our ability to be more compassionate with ourselves in hard times. Victoria Brattini is a senior teacher for the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion and founder of Laguna Meditation in Laguna Beach, California. A dedicated meditator for over 40 years, Victoria has worked with teenagers, university students, and adults. She's passionate about teaching and mentoring others. A previous director of health programs, Victoria now regularly leads groups, courses, and classes on mindful self-compassion.
If you enjoy our show, we'd love for you to leave us a review. Follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, or Twitter. And don't forget to join our free Facebook group. You can find it at facebook.com/groups/nobleminded. And as always, you can learn about upcoming events, get our show notes, and hop on our email list at noblemindpodcast.com. We hope you enjoy the show. Hello, we are here with Victoria Brattini. Thank you so much for joining us today. Perhaps you could just get us started by telling us a little bit about yourself.
Well, as you said, I'm Victoria Brattini, and I'm the founder of Laguna Meditation in Laguna Beach, California. And I teach mindfulness and self-compassion, mindful self-compassion. And my passion is teaching, mentoring, and inspiring people to be more compassionate, to really hold themselves with a sense of care, tenderness, learning how to be with ourselves.
I'm curious how this passion started. How did you get involved in self-compassion yourself initially?
Oh, I think like a lot of people, I have my own suffering. At the time that I learned about mindful self-compassion, I was going through a really tough emotional time. There was a lot of trauma in my life. I have a very large background in psychology, but nothing was really helping. And so I was really curious, and I'm also blessed with an incredible goddaughter who at the time was working on her PhD in Boston in clinical psychology. And we share our love of psychology. And she said, I think you might really want to investigate the work of Christopher Germer and Kristen Neff. And that was my first introduction to it. And it just went from there. It just kind of grew little by little. Like a lot of people, I was skeptical. How could something like this have such a profound change? But it actually did in my life. And then I wanted to see if it could help others.
You're a very special mindfulness and compassion teacher, and you have in effect, a fan club on Tuesdays and Thursdays on the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion's Circles of Practice. You not only have a lot of experience with this material going way back, but also clearly have internalized and sort of embody the teachings.
I think there's a conscious effort on my part to not just be a didactic teacher. The three components of mindful self-compassion, mindfulness, common humanity, and kindness, I really do believe that to help others, to be of service to others, to put this practice into doing for them, that they benefit from, also understand how I live the practice. So I teach from a position of, this is what my experience has been. And when this comes up for me, this is how I attend to myself with compassion, with mindfulness. And it's been very effective, or it connects well with others. People really the feedback I get is that because I'm authentic in sharing, and I don't have to go into every little detail of my life, but to say, okay, even like for this podcast, a friend of mine is doing something. She's actually a young woman who I'm mentoring with self-compassion and teaching. She's very anxious about leading a summit in a few weeks. And she said, I'm just like overrun with anxiety. And I said, well, I've shared with you that public speaking is anxiety producing for me. Beginning new classes is anxiety producing for me. And I was invited to do a podcast next week or at the end of this week. And this is what I will do before the podcast. And it's taking a moment to give myself compassion. Yes. My heart's pounding. Can I just breathe into this right now? Reminding myself, I'm okay. It's okay. It's going to be fine. So embodying the practice, I think, has been why people relate so well to my teaching.
You incorporate teachings from like Jack Kornfield and Thich Nhat Hanh. At the same time, my experience as a learner is that mindful self-compassion, I'm able to receive through mindful self-compassion perhaps the same teaching. Did you also find self-compassion particularly helpful or challenging when you were starting off?
I found it a little challenging, yes. I think that the challenging parts for me and for, I think, most of my students have been there's resistance at first. Like, how can something so simple be effective? And yet it is. Okay, so it's the simplicity of it that actually kind of raises a bit of a challenge. I also think that many of my students, like myself, have this tendency to want to be a perfectionist. I want to do this right. I want to be good at this. So am I doing it right? And I think what also comes into play for many of us is this feeling that intrinsically we're flawed and that we're never going to be able to change. And that this simple little practice, doesn't seem like maybe we have to do work, but it's not work in a sense. It is practice in a literal sense. You have to practice the skills to become more adept with them, just as you would practice, lifting weights. You're building another muscle in your brain. So it's simple but complex at the same time.
Yeah, I think people are so used to being aggressive with themselves to try to get results, and sort of being harsh and pressing and pushing that something like being kind to yourself as something that would achieve results can feel really confusing. Is there anything that you do to try to help people get over that sort of conundrum?
Initially, I'll explain the science behind it. That when we're self-critical, we actually are self-sabotaging ourselves. When we're self-critical, we are activating our fight, flight, and freeze system. I might even show examples of that, of how the brain works sometimes. This is the section where fight, flight, and freeze, our survival mechanism is. All that cortisol and adrenaline are flowing through us. We don't think very well. We can't think clearly. We can't be creative. We're not in a state of calm so that we can come up with a solution to handle. And when we can activate our parasympathetic nervous system, when we can literally have oxytocin and serotonin and this whole cocktail of calming chemicals, hormones flowing through our bodies, we can think more clearly. So first I explain the science of why we're treating ourselves with compassion. And I also, share with them, we're mammals, and how do mammals care for each other? Well, think back to how you treat a baby. When you pick up a crying baby, a very uncomfortable baby, and I'm the mother of 2 and the grandmother of 3, and I've had lots of practice in this, you'll notice that the first thing you do is you lower your voice. You have soft vocalization. You're almost cooing to that child. And you're rocking, you're touching, you're giving soothing touch in some way. You may be patting, rubbing, but soothing touch, soft vocalizations, and warmth activate the mammalian system of the brain. So more oxytocin, more serotonin are released and calm us down. The same thing happens when we're upset. If we change the tone of how we're speaking to ourselves. And I, just like anyone else, may start out yelling at myself. Well, how could you have done that? Or this harshness that comes up. And then I will turn it around and say, oh, I'm so sorry you're feeling this way. This does hurt. This is scary. This is uncomfortable. Can I be kind to myself in this moment? Can I give myself some compassion? Can I just hold myself with some tenderness for this? It's okay. It's going to be fine. Let's just calm down a little bit. And that, people can relate to that. They may be skeptical at first that this is going to work, but as they practice, they begin to see. It's only when you kind of look back on your practice that you see the progress of your practice. It's not a silver bullet, but it does work.
I find it fascinating that you say that the critical approach to oneself is akin to self-sabotage.
Mm-hmm.
It's too bad so many of us have internalized that way of relating.
It is, yet at the same time, it's so normal because we are hardwired for survival. We're not hardwired for happiness. Happiness is something that requires practice. We have to learn to be happy. We have to learn how to kind of appreciate the little things in life, how to savor them. And that helps to strengthen the happiness section of our brain. But, as Rick Hansen says, negative things stick to our brain like Velcro. Positive things slide off like Teflon. So we have to savor them. We have to hold on to them for a minute.
The other day you were bringing in Thich Nhat Hanh's discussion of the 4 practices of diligence. Mm-hmm. That when we do find our mind in a rut or in an unhappy mm-hmm. place, counterproductive place, that then there are things to do. So I often, if it's a struggle, it's not self-compassion, because sometimes it seems like I find myself not struggling against experience necessarily, but struggling with difficulties that arise in the mind.
Mm-hmm. I think that's very common, for all of us, and that's where resistance comes in. I'll find myself struggling also. So one of the things I learned with Thich Nhat Hanh was this sense of putting our troubles, the unfinished things that we're kind of ruminating on, thinking about, worrying about. We can have it here right beside us, and we're super close to it, and we're ruminating on it really big time. But if we visualize a big field or a garden, a park, and we take that same trouble and we move it a little further away from us, we have some breathing room now. It's not so scary because it's not right up against us. And then we keep moving it out further and further. It doesn't mean that it's gone away. It's still in that park with us, but it's less threatening because we have some space between us. Okay, in that space, I can take some time to kind of recalibrate myself, to take a deep breath, to offer myself some compassion. I also can look at whatever my challenge is, my problem, whatever you want to call it, that doesn't quite have a solution yet. And I can give it space to germinate. I can allow it to go into the ground, to kind of plant seeds of it and say, it will germinate. Okay. I just don't have the answer right now. But if I keep worrying about it and pulling it up, and I like his garden analogy, I keep pulling it up with worry, okay, I'm not giving it an opportunity to germinate. I'm not giving it an opportunity, myself, the opportunity to have an answer arise. And frequently our answers don't come up right away, so we have to be patient.
Because I think that's something that happens to me quite frequently, that when I reach a new realization about something, then I feel like I have to have come up with a solution right away. If it's something staggering that I've discovered, then I don't know what to do.
To be honest, I grew up with a lot of trauma in my life. And so from a very early age, I needed to figure out how to calm myself. And I don't know initially, even if it was, so conscious in my part. I was the kid who was hypervigilant, a parenticized child, who lived in constant anxiety. And I needed to find a way to calm myself. I could appear calm on the outside, but I was terrified on the inside. My practice, I started meditating in the 70s. That's how I got to mindfulness as a college student. And I was really fortunate that I had an upperclassman who was from India and a very practiced meditator, also yoga, but not yoga the way we tend to do yoga here in the West, but yoga as truly a meditative practice. And my first book on meditation and yoga was one that she left to me when she graduated and went back to India. And it was the book that her grandfather had given her.
Wow.
So it's a cherished part of my library, but it gave me another way of looking at life, of kind of settling myself, of calming my mind. And since then, I've practiced meditation and particularly mindfulness every day.
It strikes me. Thank you so much for sharing some of your experience. I know a lot of us can relate, especially this idea that we manage when we're younger to figure out how to maintain appearances, but sort of be falling apart inside. It's like we sort of figure it out from the outside in, to sort of keep everyone else happy and unsuspecting that we're having troubles, for a lot of us. And then, right. The next layer of work, I guess, is to figure out, how to do it between our ears so that we really can stabilize and take care of ourselves. And what does your mindfulness practice look like these days? I'm curious.
My mindfulness practice, there's a formal part of it where I will sit in meditation every day. I remind not just myself, but everyone I teach that mindfulness is just another word for awareness of what's happening inside me, awareness of where my mind is going, where my heart is, where my body is, what kind of tension is in my body. And I'll sit now with curiosity when things like, I'm very experienced at worrying brain and planning brain. And so I will notice when that comes up a lot. And I am to the place where I can laugh at it. I can actually smile at it. The Dalai Lama or Thich Nhat Hanh or Matthew Ricard talk about, smiling internally at ourselves when we are greeting ourselves again. Well, when I'm greeting worry and planning, anxiety, I smile at it now. And I can sit there calmly with him and hold it. I'm not in resistance as much anymore. It's definitely there, but I don't need to push it away. It's okay. It's part of me. And the other part of my mindfulness practice is on my trusty phone is the Plum Village app for a mindfulness bell. And for me, my mindfulness bell goes off every 15 minutes. That might be too much for some people. But for me, even when my phone is on very low and the bell goes off, I actively take a deep breath. I scan my body. Is there any tension going on? Is my mind calm? Is my heart space open? Or am I shutting down? And it's just awareness of where I am.
It sounds like it's almost like a set of checkpoints for yourself when it happens. Like, take a breath. Where's my body? How do I feel? In a kind of, fluid way at this point too.
Exactly. And do I need to bring compassion to myself in this moment?
I was thinking about what you were saying when you were meditating and you feel like, oh, there's the worrying brain, or the planning brain, and being able to be good humored about it and not need to get rid of it. Alex and I were talking about this the other day about like how much of our struggle can we live with, right? And how much do we try to get rid of it? And I don't know if you've had any journey on that you can articulate for us about like that sort of cultivation of accepting of the worrying, as just sort of part of life versus like, this is causing me a lot of suffering. I really want to get to the other side of this somehow.
That's so normal, I think. At
Yeah.
least that has been my experience. For me, there came a point where you let go of the worry about the worry. One of my biggest challenges in my life, I was married for over 40 years. We lived together for 44. We actually were a couple for 46. And yet, shortly after our 40th wedding anniversary, we divorced. And for many years, I struggled within that relationship and worried what was the right thing to do. And I came to understand later that sometimes the most self-compassion thing you can do is to leave a relationship that isn't working for you. No matter how much I worried about it and how many different practices I brought to it, how much better I tried to be as a listener, a communicator, a holder of the other, it wasn't changing. And I was deeply unhappy. And so that worry was really eating at me and creating a lot of stress.
Mm-hmm.
And there was the worry of what would happen afterwards because I knew it was going to be extremely hard. And yet I opened up that field, that garden, and planted those seeds. And eventually an answer came. It wasn't quite the answer I wanted, but it was the answer I knew I had to act on. And you kind of let go of the worry about the worry. It's going to be there. It's normal to worry about certain things. And we're so programmed in many ways, as Christopher Germer will say, or Paul Gilbert, so much of what we worry about is not really our fault. A lot of it has been transferred to us either genetically or environmentally as little children. It doesn't mean that it doesn't impact us, but we don't have to continue to worry about it. We just have to act responsibly with it. And so for me, acting responsibly with it is to give myself compassion for it, not to beat myself up about it, to understand in my heart of hearts, I'm doing the best I can. And I know you're doing the best you can. Nobody wants to beat themselves up. Nobody wants to hurt me. And so when we begin to feel acceptance around that, and that other people are struggling too, but they're doing the best they can, we soften to ourselves and others. And that's what compassion is. We see the suffering and we want to make it better. We want to help people and we want to help ourselves.
Yeah, I think sometimes the worry, as you gave that example from your relationship, that sometimes the worry is just a sign that there's some kind of ongoing like challenge in a relationship or in life that's just unresolved and maybe unresolvable in the present state of affairs. I don't know. I think I've had that experience too, where I've been worrying about something that just needs more time, kind of going back to letting things percolate or germinate. It's just something that the time isn't right, or like everything, all the factors aren't clear yet, or, some other set of experiences need to happen before clarity emerges. And the worrying is trying to force that along to get to like a resolution, but it's just sort of part of the process of that challenge.
Well, I think also for me, there was a time, much less so now, that I had such a belief system that if I worked hard enough, I could find the answer, the solution. And I believed that as a child, if I was just better, if I was, if I learned more, knew more, did more, okay, I could find the solution to this problem. And that continued with me. It continued with me. I have a son. My oldest son was 10 when he had a very malignant brain tumor. I used to tell people that I would turn over every stone to be sure that he survived. I really felt like I had to make sure that everything was so. So lots of pressure on myself. And in my marriage, it was the same way. I kept thinking that if I could just keep turning over stones, I would find out what the solution to this problem was, and then we would be okay. And it didn't occur to me until many years later that maybe there isn't a solution to this. And maybe the solution is that I have to remove myself from this situation. And then it's not all my responsibility. Whereas the parenticized child felt that it was always her responsibility to make sure that everyone was safe. It's unrealistic.
On his podcast, Zach Beach asked you what self-compassion feels like.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you said it feels like letting go.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just blown away because that's not my experience of it. But then when I realized, I think I'm striving to solve.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, wow. So I appreciate the fact that you've spent plenty of time with these things and you've connected the dots between different things. Much more 3D and shows me where I need improvement.
Are you sure of that?
Lack of a better word.
Well, just in the fact that, we all strive, it's just kind of built in, I think. But the moment for me, when I realize, oh, there I go again, I'm striving, I take a deep breath. I put my hand over my heart, soothing touch. And I just say, I'm going to let go of this striving right now. I'm just going to let it go. And I take a deep breath and I literally feel like something is leaving me, this striving. That doesn't mean it might not come back a little later on the day, but it does feel like, okay.
Sometimes I try not to worry by sort of turning down the awareness almost, or like pushing things out of focus almost.
So perhaps can you try, okay, worry is here. And first of all, just, feelings of worry are here, putting space. So it's not like I am worrying, but feelings of worry are here. So you have some space in there. And can I give myself some compassion for that? Worrying hurts. Worrying is uncomfortable. And, understanding worry does come back. So instead of, kind of pushing it away, resisting again, or trying to push it in the back of your mind, worry is here again. Make it a friend. Worry is here again, and we're going to go off on this little adventure together. And I'll be kind to you. Hello, worry. And yes, you're going to, you may speak harshly to me, but I'm going to, ask you once again to speak softly and kindly to me. And we're going to come up with a solution for this problem that you are quite accurately alerting me to time and time again.
And it's interesting that when I check totally, when I say but, it's not really rebutting it in any way. At the same time, in the same state, if I have a guided meditation with a teacher, then sort of the lighting changes, like the state changes. But then when I get off the meditation, the other state starts to return.
Mm-hmm. Well, perhaps just having gratitude for the fact that you didn't have that state while you were meditating, and that maybe that state will expand more and more as you continue to meditate. But you did have a respite in the meditation, and so perhaps savoring those moments to really let them sink into your brain. And savoring takes about 10 seconds. So really taking the time to savor that, you're building up that part of your brain. So that when you do fall back into a more familiar pattern, in your brain, you still have moments of remembering that you were without worry at that time that you were in meditation.
Right. And I think giving myself more space around it. It seems like there's a sense of like, oh no, the match is almost over. Like there are 15 seconds left. I have to have all the answers. I don't.
What you're saying, Alex, also reminds me of just that challenge of building that bridge between guided practice and independent practice, or bringing things into life that you can experience like on the mat or on the cushion to off the mat or off the cushion. That those are challenging transitions, you know, that you can get some really great benefit from a guided practice, but then, you know, it takes some real time, and, you know, it's not easy to then sort of cultivate that state when you're not in that sort of frame.
It reminds me, I think it was in the 70s, early 80s. There was a book that I read and reread a zillion times, and it was called Chop Wood, Carry Water. And it was really, you know, about that we can sit in meditation. We set our intentions for doing good, and yet the same things come up over and over again. And it also reminds me of Pema Chopran's teaching. You know, we're often a compassionate mess. And that's what, you know, we're often in chaos. And if we can bring compassion to it, we can have compassionate chaos, a compassionate mess. But we are who we are, and we often come back to exactly who we are time and time again. And so that is the practice, that we're not trying to throw ourselves away.
Right.
We're trying to befriend ourselves, to be kinder to ourselves. When that stuff that defines us keeps coming back. It's almost, for me, sometimes it feels like a broken record that just keeps replaying. Like, okay, heard
you
this
again?
song before, did this dance before. Here we go.
Yeah.
It's curious that under the guidance of a good teacher, I feel sort of like there's a scaffolding for this organism to walk and operate. And then when that scaffolding is taken away, it's just a bunch of rocks kind of like, coming apart.
And I think that's also where common humanity comes in. Okay? That common humanity also gives us a certain scaffolding in knowing that we're not alone. Okay? That others experience things, even our most shameful things, when we have the courage to admit what our most shameful things have been, we're often surprised. I know I've been surprised many times about when someone says, well, I'll share with you, I've had a very similar experience and I've never told anyone either. And I'm like, kind of shocked in me. And an example which may help someone out there was about 7 years ago when I had to sell my house on the East Coast. And I was extremely heartbroken, like beyond devastated. I came to California kicking and screaming, and I did not want to leave the East Coast. And we held on to our house. We moved here in 2006. And so we held on to it for a good 10 years. And I went back and forth. And when I sold it, I was really, really heartbroken. I was in an MSc course at the time, and we were asked to share something that caused us a lot of shame. And so I shared with holding on to this house for 10 years and how heartbroken, how grief-stricken I was when we sold it. And I didn't think anyone else was going to relate to that. And I got paired up with a gentleman who was probably a little older than me. And my sense of shyness did not want to be the one to share first. And yet I couldn't think of anything else I wanted to share that felt so shameful to me. So he went, and his story was almost identical to mine. He shared that he held on to a house that he had raised his children in. He'd been divorced for 10 years, but he couldn't bring himself to sell the house. And he filled up with tears and said, I have so much shame for that. it seems so ridiculous looking back on it that I would hold on to a house that it meant so much to me at the time. And the tears rolled down my eyes and wow, that was my story.
Wow.
So that piece of common humanity, and it was a big lesson for me that in sharing and being vulnerable, as Brené Brown talks so eloquently about having courage over comfort. It just gave me this connection with this other human being that made me feel so much less afraid and helped dissolve so much of my shame about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's just shame just breeds in silence, right? We just assume we're all alone right up to the moment we share, and then everyone goes, me too.
Absolutely.
This is the power of the three components of mindful self-compassion. Mindfulness, common humanity, and self-kindness. And I also become aware that one can do those more thoroughly. Sometimes I can do it in a more perfunctory way, like, oh, I'm being mindful, or I am. Check, I've done the common humanity, but I'm not really feeling it. And when I feel it, it just touches it.
And in my experience, the feeling of common humanity includes vulnerability, where you're really allowing yourself, you're opening up your heart to share something that has been hurtful or painful for you, that's created some kind of suffering. And when you're willing to open up to that without judgment of yourself, you do hear that echo from others. Me too. Okay. I felt this way. And in many ways, I find that my opening up gives others permission to open up, but they then let out what's going on in them. And then we laugh and talk about why we've held on to this for so long and why those kinds of things like shame, the things that we are so afraid to make ourselves vulnerable with. I think as Chris Germer says, they also are the things that perhaps spoken or unspoken internally are saying, am I lovable? Will others love me if I share this? So it's that quest to want to be loved, and every one of us has that. It doesn't end.
And it's curious how, regardless of people's circumstances, the themes seem like, that's my story too. It's just the details are different. Yeah.
Exactly.
You also talk about is it the 3 buttons of self? What are they?
The 3 universal triggers of compassion.
That's it. Yeah, I think that would be useful for people to hear.
Yes, the 3 universal triggers of compassion are soothing touch, gentle vocalizations, and physical warmth. So just changing our own tone for ourselves, literally soothing ourselves by touching, whether it's your hands over your heart, or there's studies showing that just rubbing your upper arms in particular is very soothing, perhaps rubbing your belly. I've had men in my class who are bald who love to rub their heads for soothing touch. Some people like to, cup their face, their cheeks. I tried to discourage that during COVID since they told us not to touch our faces. But some people, it's very soothing and comforting to just kind of hold their face and rub it a little bit. I also think soothing touch can also come by having like a here and now stone, and or something in your hand that you're rubbing. Like children, it's often a stuffed animal, but something that you're rubbing that gives you that sense of comfort.
Like, would a cozy sweater be part of that?
Yes.
That sense of like cozying up under a blanket or something. Yeah.
Yes. Coziness and, warmth and wrapping yourself up and touching. It's very effective. It helps to calm you down. And the other thing, in terms of self-compassion, those are the universal triggers, but mindfulness helps to calm us down too. So, if a cup of tea is what you need at that time, or a cup of coffee, being fully mindful for it. So this is jasmine tea. Okay, so I can really smell it. I take in the scent. And when I put that tea in my mouth, I feel it. I feel the warmth, the flavor. Okay, I feel it going down my esophagus to my stomach. I feel the warmth in it. I try to be as fully present, the warmth of the mug in my hand, the feeling of the mug in my hand. Those moments of mindfulness help my brain disengage from the survival segment, the sympathetic nervous system, so I can reduce the cortisol, reduce the adrenaline in my body at that time. There's other ways of being self-compassionate. A walk out in nature. Nature is very compassionate and helps to soothe us a lot. I just saw a study yesterday out of England that the sound of birds, being in a bird sanctuary, was one of the most calming things for people. Just, yeah, I thought that was really, really beautiful. But, I'm sitting right beside the ocean right now. And so moments before we came on, there were dolphins out there. And that was a way of soothing myself too. Like, okay, this is a moment of calmness and beauty. So there are lots of ways.
Thank you so much for these great suggestions. Yeah. So if people are interested in studying more with you, learning more from you, where should they go?
Well, they can go to my website, Laguna Meditation, or they can email me at lagunameditation@icloud.com, or they can go on Instagram for Laguna Meditation, or LinkedIn under my name, Victoria Brattini.
Wonderful. Thank you. We'll share all those in our show notes for our listeners. Thank you so much, Victoria. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. It's really been a pleasure. It's really my honor and privilege to be here with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening today.
If you enjoyed this episode, we hope you'll hit subscribe, leave us a great rating or review, and spread the word. You can also go to noblemindpodcast.com to join our email list. You'll get a weekly behind-the-scenes message, news, announcements, and other special goodies we come up with just for you. Thanks for listening, and bye for now.